Sunderland are one of the oldest clubs in England. They were formed in 1879 and the club's won 6 top flight titles, although the last of those came in 1936. They've also won the FA Cup twice in 1937 and 1973. Their last spell in the Premier League was for 10 seasons after being promoted under the management of Roy Keane in the 2006-2007 season, before they were relegated in 2016-17, finishing right at the bottom of the table. Things would get worse the following season as they finished rock bottom of the Championship and were relegated to League One, where they languished for 4 seasons before winning the playoff final. Last season, in their first season back in the Championship, they surprised everyone by finishing in the playoff spots, but this season they failed to kick on, and as we record, this currently sit 10th in the Championship. They've also already sacked Tony Mowbray this season, and his replacement Michael Beale hasn't exactly hit the ground running, and he's already coming under massive pressure. The aim for this rebuild is to make it back to the Premier League as soon as possible, ideally in Season 1, to allow us to hopefully become an established Premier League side and challenge for European football before the end of the 5-season rebuild. We're taking over a Sunderland team that have a lot of promising young players, but there are some key positions where they're lacking in talent. Up front, there isn't really an out-and-out goal scorer on the books, and they could do with some experience in some key positions as well. There's not an awful lot of experience in the defensive half of the field. Financially, going into the first season, we've got £7 million in the transfer budget. We've got 15,000 available in the wage budget, so there's room to do a bit of manoeuvring. So we've made it to the end of the first transfer window, and things have started pretty well, certainly as far as the league's concerned. As you can see, we've played 4 and we're top of the table. Transfer-wise, the only incoming deal that we did was signing Martin Dardai from Hertha Berlin. Can play centre-half, can play in the defensive midfield role. Just adds a bit more quality. Yeah, not adding too much experience, but hopefully a building block as the 5 seasons go on. Tactically, given that we have no real out-and-out striker, we're going to play in a similar way to the way that Sunderland seems to have played most of the season. We're going to play with a back 4, 2 in the midfield, and then we've got everyone kind of playing everywhere. Up top, we've got 2 wide men, we've got a man in behind, we've got a shadow striker. It seems to have worked so far, but whether it lasts the full season or not without having to be changed is something to look at. So as we said, things have gone well in the league. We started with a 2-2 draw at home to Ipswich on the opening day of the season. We then managed to beat Barnsley in the League Cup first round. And then an entertaining game against Preston. We managed to come from behind to go 3-2 in front, to be pegged back to 3-3, to then end up winning 4-3. Rotherham, really comfortable 4-0 victory at home. Coventry, we went away and won 5-3. We seem to be a bit of an entertaining team. And then Preston got their revenge on us in the second round of the League Cup, beating us 4-1 at home as well. So let's go ahead and simulate the rest of Season 1 and see if we can get ourselves promoted. And there we can see we've had an interesting season. League-wise, we made it to the playoff final and beat Southampton 1-0 in the playoff final. Patrick Roberts getting the only goal of the game in the 74th minute. We ended up finishing 4th in the league table. We beat Ipswich in the semi-finals of the playoffs and then went and beat Southampton. And you've got a feel for Southampton. They were 16 points clear in 3rd. Missed out by 5 points on promotion and ended up getting another season at Championship level. We didn't really have anyone in any of the stats categories. And as the season went on, we kind of dropped off and continued dropping off. The lowest we were was 5th in the league, and we managed to make it up to 4th on the last day of the season. The FA Cup, we managed to make it to the semi-final, where we got beat 5-2 by Norwich, an all-Championship tie. And I can only think we were chasing the game, because we were 1-0 up, 2-1 up at half-time, Then they scored 2 in 2 minutes to make it 3-2, and then got 2 in injury time, presumably as we were pushing forward looking for an equaliser to knock us out 5-2. We knocked out Brentford in the quarter-final. We also Preston in another cup competition. This time we beat them. We knocked out Aston Villa after extra time in the replay. And in the third round, we knocked out local rivals Middlesbrough. We ended up tweaking the formation in November after we'd had a bit of a poor run and went with 2 through the middle and 2 wingers rather than going with no one right through the middle. And that's what we played for most of the rest of the season. We had a really bad patch in January and a bit of a sticky patch in February. April wasn't great, but we did enough to be able to at least get into those playoff positions. We've won the playoff final and we've been promoted. I thought we were going to struggle for goals. In the end, Nazari Rusin picked up 18, Jack Clark with 14, Roberts with 14, Ekwa got 13, Bradley Dax somehow stayed fit enough to get 12. Jack Clark, obviously the biggest threat that we had in the team, along with Patrick Roberts, which is what you would expect based on what happens in real life this season. Looking ahead to next season, we've got 35 million in the transfer budget. We've got 339,000 in the wage budget. We've got some work to do in order to craft a squad that's going to be good enough to stay up in the Premier League. This whole first season in the Premier League is just going to be about staying up. If we finish 17th and stay up, that's success. So, Season 2 has begun, and it hasn't exactly begun in outstanding fashion. We've played 4, we've won 1, we've lost 3, and we've already got a -8 goal difference. Transfer-wise, very little on the outgoings apart from loan deals. There's a few players left at their end of the contract, but incoming, we've spent a fair amount of money on some young, promising players for the future. So we started with Juan Sforza, can play centre midfield, can play defensive midfield, at a push can play in the number 10 role. We've also picked up Alan Velasco, who can play wide, can play in the number 10 role as well. We've picked up Adamo Nagalo as a centre-half, come right back from Nordjylland. And we've picked up Nelson Viper from Mainz as well. The aim with all 4 of those is they're all young, promising players. The Sunderland model in real life seems to be to buy young players that you can then turn a profit on. So hopefully, if we do manage to improve the squad, we can maybe make some money on some of those to help fund it going forward in the rest of the rebuild. And then we added a couple of free transfers. We started with Kjell Scherpen to provide some competition for Anthony Patterson in goal. And then we added Christian Kouame to hopefully give us a goal threat up front. Bit more experience than Nelson Viper. Transfers mean we've kind of gone away from the formation we had last season. We're looking at a 4-3-3. We're looking at playing Velasco wide right. We're looking at playing Jack Clark wide left. The way the season started, the assistant manager had put Sherpen in goal, but I think Patterson's probably the better option. So we've locked those 3 into the position. And then looking at how the season started, pre-season looked so good. And then opening day of the season, away at biggest rivals Newcastle and hammered 3-0. We were then at home to Brighton, who are top of the table currently. And they took the lead. We pulled a goal back through Kouame, but Evan Ferguson got his second of the game to give them a 2-1 victory. We then went away to Anfield and got taken apart by Liverpool, losing 5-0. We got our first victory of the season in any competition in the League Cup second round. We won 3-0 at home to Salford. And then at home to Arsenal, we somehow came away, thanks to a 94th minute Patrick Roberts goal, with a 5-4 victory. It was one hell of a game. Kouame missed a penalty. We went 1-0 up, it was 1-1. We went 2-1 up, it was 2-2. They made it 3-2. We equalised and then went ahead. Then Ben White pulled it back to 4-4. And then Patrick Roberts got a goal in the 94th minute, as we said. So we've not had the best of starts. We might be kind of running into a bit of form. We've won our last 2 games in all competitions, but as we said at the end of last season, the aim really is 17th. Make sure we stay in the Premier League and then build from there. So let's go ahead and simulate season 2 and see if we can survive. And so there we are. In the end, we managed to survive pretty comfortably. We finished in 12th with 45 points. As you can see, cup competitions, Aston Villa weren't exactly our favourite opposition there. We did require to do a bit of work in the transfer window in January to actually be able to achieve what we've achieved in that second half of the season. 2 incomings in January and an outgoing as well. So first, in terms of the outgoing, we sold Patrick Roberts to Al Nassr for 30 million, rising to 33 million. He actually was struggling to get into the team, especially with the signing of Velasco. So 30 million for someone who wasn't getting into the team seemed too good to turn down. And then with the rest of the money we had in the bank, we then had made 2 signings in January. We signed Jared Branthwaite from Everton. It cost an awful lot of money, but he did come in and steady the ship for us. And then we also were lacking a bit in defensive options, so we picked up Josh Doig from Hellas Verona. Again, a bit pricey perhaps, but hopefully those 2 players in future seasons can help drive us forward. We stuck with the same tactic pretty much all the way through the season. We had a really bad run in December, in the run-up to kind of Christmas. But you'd kind of expect it. We lost to Tottenham, we lost to Man City, we lost to Man United, and we lost to Chelsea. And the second half of the season, we weren't that great at all. Very, very patchy form. We'd win 1, draw 1, lose 1. We were kind of a bit all over the place. But one of the standout results of the season, penultimate game of the season, beating Man United 4-1 at home. Again, we didn't have anyone in any of the stats categories, which for a team that finished mid-table, you probably expect. The one thing we really did lack this season was goals. Kouame, top scorer with 13 goals. Wiper got 9, Clark got 9, Velasco got 9, and then the next best we're looking at is 4. We obviously really kind of struggled creatively and in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net as well. So that's something that we might need to address going into next season. And we've got money to do it. We've got 58 million in the transfer budget. We've got 157,000 in the wage budget. So hopefully we can just keep improving the squad, move us further up the table, and a couple of things. Hopefully by the end of the season we can be challenging for the European places, and also looking to try and finish above Newcastle as well. So season 3's began. We've got 4 points from 3 games, so things have gone pretty well. But I think we've had a pretty decent transfer window. I think we've strengthened the squad, and hopefully we can start looking up the table. So in terms of the outgoings, there's some pretty key players have gone. Christian Kouame, who we signed at the start of last season on a free transfer, we sold for 27 million to Norwich. Club captain Luke O'Nien, we've sold for 5 million to West Brom. And we've sold number 1 goalkeeper Anthony Patterson for 15 million to Al Ittihad, where they've given him £250,000 per week as a wage. I think we've done well to get that deal. And then in terms of the incoming, so obviously we were looking to improve in goal. So we brought in Guillaume Restes, 20 million from Toulouse. Really promising young goalkeeper. Hopefully that's us for the rest of the save in terms of the goalkeeper position. We've then added Facundo Torres, who can play anywhere behind the front man, can even potentially play up front as well. Again, real quality that we're adding to the squad here. And then the big money deal that we've done, signing Victor Gyökeres from Sporting for 50 million, rising to 60 million. He scored 42 goals in 61 games for Sporting. He's hit the ground running for us pretty quickly. 4 games, 3 goals. And hopefully with someone with his ability up front, it can fire us up the table. Tactically, we're sticking with the 4-3-3. Nothing much has changed there. And as far as the league season started, we started with a 2-1 victory away at Arsenal. We got off to a great start. Facundo Torres early on. Victor Gyökeres were getting the winner late on there. At home to Aston Villa, things were different. We didn't really perform. Calvert-Lewin up front for them. They managed to come away with a 2-0 victory. We were then at home to Mansfield in the second round of the League Cup, which we won. And then Tottenham, we went 1-0 down just after half-time, but a Gyökeres penalty just before the end saw us get a 1-1 draw. And hopefully we can progress up the league table from where we were last season. So let's go ahead, simulate season 3 and see where we end up. And there we are. What a season we've had. We've ended up finishing 5th in the league, which is enough to qualify for the Champions League. And the especially sweet thing for the fans is Newcastle are way down in 17th. We ended up with 70 points. Just an outstanding season. We were right up near the top for a big chunk of the season, sort of between 3rd, 4th and 5th. We made it to the semi-finals of the League Cup. We made it to the semi-finals of the FA Cup, where we were comfortably beaten by Leicester, unfortunately. It didn't help that we had a player sent off just after half-time at 1-0. I mean, we've started to get players near the top of these stats. Victor Gyökeres, first season with the club, 27 league goals, only behind Erling Haaland. Alan Velasco, the most assists in the league. Victor Gyökeres, the most man of the matches. Things have gone pretty well. In the end, Gyökeres ended up with 33 goals in all competitions. Viper with 13. We're still lacking an awful lot of goal scoring options around those two, with Sforza being the next with 7. But obviously we've managed to do enough there to get some serious points and end up finishing 5th and qualifying for the Champions League. In terms of transfers, there was one more transfer that was done in the January transfer window. We sold Martin Dardai to Bayer Leverkusen for 14.5 million. And what that means is going into season 4, we've got 79 million in the bank. We've got 65,000 in the wage budget. And hopefully we can push on and maybe make a dent in Europe. So we're into season 4 and things haven't started that well. We've played 3 games, we've got 2 points. Not brilliant at all. Transfer-wise, nothing much has happened in terms of the outgoings. And all of the players that we signed were on free transfers. So firstly, we signed Jan Couto to give us some depth at right back and on that right-hand side of the pitch in general. We then signed Lazar Samardzic after his contract with Udinese ended. Again, can kind of play in a couple of different positions in that midfield and attacking roles. We picked up Zinho van Heusen after his contract at Inter ended, just to provide a bit of depth at centre-half. And that was also the reason for signing Mary Demiral once his contract at Al Ahly ended. Real quality centre-half, especially as Nagalo seems to be playing a lot at right-back. Hopefully should be a first-team regular throughout the season. We then picked up Otavio, who can play right, left, centre in the attacking midfield and midfield regions. And then we completed a trio of signings from Saudi Arabian clubs by picking up Frank Kessie at the end of his contract as well. He's on an awful lot of money, so hopefully he can pick up his performances from where we've been early on in the season. Tactically, we're not changing anything, we're sticking with the 4-3-3. And as far as the season started, again, opening day of the season away at Newcastle. This time we lost 1-0 and Frank Kessie missed a penalty. We then drew at home to Brighton thanks to a 96th minute goal by Lazar Samardzic. And then we drew 0-0 away at Wolves. The concerning thing is in those 3 games we've only scored 1 goal. And Gyökeres doesn't seem to have hit the ground running like he did last season. Obviously, with having finished 5th in the league last season, we've qualified for the Champions League. And we've got a pretty bad run of fixtures. We've got Panathinaikos up first, we've got Lazio, Barcelona, Marseille, Club Brugge, Midtjylland, and then we finish with Bayern and Dortmund. And I think we might be struggling to make it out of the league phase into the knockouts, but hopefully the Champions League doesn't distract too much from our league form. So let's go ahead and simulate the rest of season 4 and find out what happens. So, all in all, not too disastrous a season. We managed to finish in 7th in the league, which qualifies us for the Conference League next season. So we've managed to retain Champions League, European football. We still managed to finish ahead of Newcastle, this time just on goal difference. Nelson Viper appears to have become our star player this season. Second in the average ratings, 22 goals, only behind Rasmus Højlund and Facundo Torres with the most assists in the league. Champions League, we finished in 13th position and made it to the knockout stage. Obviously, we had to play in the playoff round, where we were drawn against PSV. We lost the first leg 1-0, won the second leg 6-1 to go through. Unfortunately, we then ran into Man City, drew the first leg 0-0, and then got hammered 5-2 in the second leg. And then FA Cup, we made it to the 5th round where we were beaten by Liverpool, and the Carabao Cup, we made it to the 3rd round where we were beaten by Burnley. Looking at the squad, we seem to have scored maybe a few more goals this season. Viper with 23 goals, Gyökeres with 16, Facundo Torres with 13 goals and 14 assists, Otavio with 12 goals and 10 assists. So really, really starting to develop into an established Premiership team. We've qualified for European football 2 seasons in a row. And going into the 5th and final season of this rebuild, we've got 84.4 million in the bank. We've got 106,000 in the wage budget. And we're in the Europa Conference League. And I think we might have a chance of making a pretty decent run in that competition. So let's see what happens in season 5. Season 5 started well. We've got 8 points from 4 games. We're sat in 2nd position in the league. But the transfer window was, let's say, stressful. Not much really happened in terms of outgoings until deadline day, when Arsenal, well, in fact, it was about a week before deadline day, Arsenal made an offer for Victor Gyökeres, which matched the release clause in his contract, and the deal didn't go through until there was 15 minutes left on deadline day, which caused a problem for us in terms of replacing him. But we'll look at the rest of the incomings first before we mention what happened there. We started with adding Morten Frendrup, central midfielder, can play defensive midfielder, a push from Inter Milan. We then added Aaron Hickey from Brentford, can play either side, right back or left back. And we signed Tommaso Baldanzi on a free transfer once his deal with Empoli ended. And then deadline day. And we did a deal to sign Jeremy Doku as a potential wide left or centre forward, depending on what we were doing. We did try to sign a replacement for Gyökeres. We had a deal done for Joshua Zirkzee. But because of how long it took for the Victor Gyökeres deal to go through, the Zirkzee deal got cancelled because it wasn't going to get done before the deadline. And then Gyökeres left with 15 minutes left to go on the deadline. So not the best end to the transfer window, and it was rather stressful that week trying to find a replacement for Gyökeres, and it didn't happen. Tactically, we've tweaked the player role slightly, but we're sticking with a 4-3-3. And the season seems to have started pretty well. We started with a 6-1 victory at home against Nottingham Forest and followed that up with a 3-1 victory away at Fulham. We then were in the qualifiers of the Conference League and won the first leg 4-2 away at Rakow before we drew 3-3 with Liverpool at home thanks to a late Nelson Viper equaliser. We went to the second leg against Rakow at home and won 5-0, comfortably seeing us through to the league phase there. We drew 2-2 with Man United, with Victor Gyökeres putting in his last performance. We got pulled back in the 92nd minute with a Mason Mount equaliser. And then we beat Fulham 2-0 in the third round of the League Cup on deadline day. So, as we said, we're second in the table. Things have started well in the league. Hopefully we don't miss the goals of Victor Gyökeres too much. He didn't score that many last season. Nelson Viper was the main man through the middle, so hopefully that continues this season. And we've got the Europa Conference League to look forward to. So we've got, I think, probably a pretty decent draw as far as the league phase is concerned. We've got Karabag, Austria Vienna, Rosenborg, Rangers, Vålerenga and Skandia. And hopefully you would have to say, based on that, you would expect us to finish in the top 8 of the league phase, make it through to the round of 16, and hopefully we can go deep in this competition. But let's go ahead, simulate the 5th and final season, and hopefully we don't miss Victor Gyökeres too much. So, season 5 has gone pretty well. We've ended up finishing 6th. So 3 seasons in a row we've qualified for European football, each for different European competitions. So we're going to be in the Europa League, obviously after this save's ended. Yet again, as far as the fans are concerned, we finished ahead of Newcastle. And Facundo Torres seems to have been kind of our star player this season, certainly as far as the league itself is concerned. But the real special things happened in our final game of the season. We went to Istanbul in the Europa Conference League final where we played against Rapid and got off to a decent start in the first half. Jeremy Doku opening the scoring after 23 minutes. And then in the second half, a Doku corner came out to Velasco on the edge of the box. He found Facundo Torres, who fired home to put us 2-0 up with just over 20 minutes left. And then shortly after that, a short corner from Velasco to Torres. Velasco plays it into the box, and there's Juan Sorza wrapping up a 3-0 victory to see us lift the Europa Conference League trophy. As far as our progress is concerned in the competition, we actually finished top of the league phase. We won all 6 games really comfortably as well. Apart from the one game that wasn't that comfortable was the 1-0 victory over Austria Vienna, but 5-2 against Skandia, 4-1 against Vålerenga, 4-1 away at Rangers, 9-0 against Rosenborg, 3-0 against Karabag. And then in the round of 16, we just snuck past Vålerenga. We won the first leg 3-2. We won the first leg 4-3 and then drew 1-1 in the second leg. Quarter final, we went through 11-2 aggregate against Young Boys. The semi-final, we went through 8-4 against Cologne. And then, as we've seen, we dispatched Rapid 3-0 in the final. Some star players we had in the competition, Alan Velasco and Nelson Viper right up there in terms of the top average rating. Nelson Viper up there in terms of goals. Facundo Torres and Velasco up there in terms of assists as well. We made it to the quarterfinal of the FA Cup and the 4th round of the League Cup. Looking at the squad, Nelson Viper with 30 goals and 11 assists. Frank Kessie popped up with 16 goals. Facundo Torres with 15 goals and 24 assists. Velasco with 15 and 16. Sforza with 14 and 16. And Otavio got into double figures for both goals and assists. Undoubtedly a really strong season, especially when you factor in losing our talisman up front in Victor Gyökeres right on deadline day. And there we are, the end of 5 seasons at Sunderland. I think you've got to say successful. We managed to make it out of the Championship through the playoffs in the first season. First season in the Premier League, steady, mid-table. Second season in the Premier League, qualified for the Champions League. Third season, still qualified for European football. And the 4th season in the Champions League, the 5th season in the Save, again qualified for European football for the 3rd season in a row and picked up that Europa Conference League trophy as well. And there we are, the end of a rebuild with Sunderland, and I think you'd agree, a pretty successful one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.